Here with Bobby Marks from ESPN to talk about NBA trades. Since we're only a few weeks away, Bobby, how you doing?
I'm good, Kevin. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming on. Since we're recording this on Martin Luther King Day, let's talk about some of the teams that played today, starting with the Grizzlies and the Timberwolves. Memphis had a great 16-point comeback in the second half at home against Minnesota. At this point in the season, 28 and 15 record, fifth in offensive rating, fifth in defensive rating. And yet, Bobby, I still feel like this Grizzlies team is one of those one move away teams, despite their great success in the regular season. Are you with me there? Are you on the same page with me about Memphis?
Yeah, we were talking offline. We have this big this big trade guide that we're working on, and how I did it this year, and it will be out relatively soon. We've kind of tiered teams, and they're in my let's make a deal team, right? Like they're in the top tier. I think the reason why too is, listen, they could sit at number 3 right now or number 2, compete with Houston, who had a loss today to Detroit, and be comfortable, right? They can be comfortable right where they are. It's interesting. You study Zach Kleiman, their GM's like history. He never trades first round picks in deals. Like the trade when they acquired Marcus Smart was that Golden State pick that they traded. But they were certainly linked to Dorian Finney-Smith, and that deal was pretty close. Listen, they haggled over pick protection. That kind of fell through with Brooklyn. The Lakers come in and get him. So they kind of showed their hand a little bit as far as how aggressive they are willing to be. And when you look at it with what they have, when you have, whether it be Marcus Smart or Brandon Clark or Luke Kennard or John Conchar or Santi Aldama, and they've got all their picks in the next 7 years, that's something there to kind of, formulate as far as without touching their core guys, without touching Ja and Bane and certainly Jaren Jackson Jr. and getting Gigi Jackson back and some of your younger players. So there is the recipe there to make a deal. So yeah, I would definitely say, even as good as they've been this year, I do think they're in the market to go out and make a trade.
You mentioned Gigi Jackson. He did make his return to the floor today. He played 11 minutes off the bench in his first game of the season. For Memphis, you're right, though. Like, they don't need to deal core guys as one of those contending teams with all of their future picks. You said how with Kleiman, they did kind of tip their hand with the Finney-Smith negotiations there with how close that deal was. I also think it's interesting that, as had been widely reported, the Jimmy Butler camp told Memphis, we don't want to go there. That also is at least an indication that even if Memphis doesn't have major interest in Butler, there's at least some interest to at least have talks with Miami. And to me, I look at this Grizzlies team and it's like, boy, even if Jimmy Butler didn't want to go there, well, Paul George didn't want to go to OKC, and you got guys like Kawhi Leonard who didn't want to go to Toronto, and they end up winning a finals. To my understanding, Butler doesn't want to go there because there's no confidence that Memphis would give him a long-term contract. So he could end up just being a rental. But because his value is so deflated and because Miami might want to just take the best offer available, maybe Memphis could still make that best offer with, Smart, Clark, Kennard, that works salary-wise, plus some number of picks. And Jimmy Butler would be a great fit for this roster. Like, do you think that would be worth the risk for this Grizzlies team that's still young, that still has a path towards making future moves? Or would that be more, short-sighted, you think, for them?
I think it's worth the swing. I really do. I mean, I kind of look at it from both sides, from Miami's side and from Memphis' side. I think if we remove Houston from the equation, like Houston for Butler is probably like let's just remove like the on-court, everything, chemistry, all that, like just from the contracts, picks, everything. That's the cleanest, right?
With Van Vliet for Butler. Or even, they could do that other ways as well, but Van Vliet's clean.
It's the cleanest, right? Like that's like, how we look at it. Like everything else is complicated, whether it be like Golden State or Dallas or like any Phoenix, of course, with, the Beal situation with the no trade. Memphis is right up there as far as being like, I don't want to say easy, but it's not as it's not complicated. And you kind of laid it out there as far as when you have whether it be Marcus Smart or Brandon Clark or Kennard or Conchar, like 4 guys like that. Smart's been hurt for a good chunk of the season. Kind of, I think it's been a disappointment since they got him in that trade from the Celtics. Kennard on an expiring. Conchar's got a couple years left. Clark in and out. Like, that's clean, right? So you're not sacrificing your core guys for that. I do think it's worth a swing, even if we've said all along, like, what's the next home for Jimmy Butler in free agency? Like, if we were living in a world of, what was it, 2016, the great cap spike? If we were living in a world of 2016 and all of a sudden, like, 25 out of 29 teams are sitting with like 35 million in room, I'd be like, whoa, I don't know, man. Jimmy Butler might be going to one of these teams, but who's out there, right? Like, who is out there to sign him outright with cap space? So if you're Memphis, like, is it worth the swing for the rest of the season and then see where the number is? Like, I've said all along, like, and I know Jimmy's got a $52 million player option for next year. I've said all along, like, I think his next contract is more like that Chris Paul contract that we saw in Phoenix from a few years ago, maybe a little bit higher, where Chris signed for 4 years and 2 years were guaranteed. Third had a partial. Eventually wound up getting all of it there. But I just don't see teams lined up. And I think whoever acquires him in a trade, or we'll see how it plays out with Miami here, still has a ton of leverage as far as what that next contract is.
I mean, I think, the Grizzlies, if you're forgetting about all the complications of a deal for any of these teams, you mentioned the Suns and the Warriors and the Mavericks and all these teams, even removing all of that, if you're speaking strictly about you take Butler off of Miami and put him onto another team, to me, Memphis makes a hell of a lot more sense than Phoenix.
Yeah.
I mean, this Phoenix team, they are 500 all year long. They get absolutely destroyed again on MLK Day by the Cavaliers, 118-92. KD does not look like he's anywhere close to that guy we saw with the Warriors years ago after the 2016 cap spike. Dominant on defense, playing the 5. He is so far removed from that guy in the defensive end of the floor that Suns team can't play small. And so if they get Jimmy Butler, somehow they make it work. I don't think they're necessarily contenders anymore. I still don't feel they necessarily are. Whereas Memphis, I'd be like, ooh, wait a minute, they actually have a shot to win the whole thing now. I don't think it makes any sense for Phoenix. They're like, why quadruple down if you're Ishmael? I don't know. It makes
what's crazy, Kevin, is that before they went into Cleveland and got their doors blown off, they were 6-2 in their last 8 games. But when you look at who they played, right? I mean, like, the competition level, certainly they had a nice win in Detroit on Saturday. The competition level was not very good. I mean, that's the reality of it. And you look at how deep the Western Conference standings is. What did they go from, like, 11th to 10th? You won 6 out of 8 games, and you basically moved up a spot. And I know we can always talk about, hey, they're one run away from jumping into the top 6, right? And I know we're going to talk about Golden State in a little bit of a while, but man, listen, I've been drinking the Phoenix Kool-Aid all year. Like, I said it from the beginning. I was like, I think this can, listen, they go out and get Tyus Jones, and I thought that was a really good fit, and Mason Plumlee, and I thought they drafted really well with Ryan Dunn and Oso. I think 2 guys that certainly could help.
I'm with you.
But I'm just waiting for, what is this team right now? And even when, Booker's playing better, which is certainly, but I have no confidence when they play better teams. Like, I have no confidence at all. And that leads to, like, listen, do I think one of the big guys, I'm not talking about Beal, like Durant, when we get closer to deadline? I think that's a question for the offseason here as far as, do you pivot? And I always say this, like, the worst thing to have in the NBA when you work for a team is stubbornness, right? Like, that is the worst thing to do. And I know their owner has come out and said, like, what did he say? Like 29 out of 30 teams wouldn't trade my, for this roster, or we're traded for this roster or something like that. But man, like, I don't know how much better it is going to get. And as you said, like, if you move off Beal and you get Butler, are you better than Oklahoma City? Are you better than Houston, Memphis, Denver? Denver's playing extremely well.
Denver's looking like they're kind of back.
Yeah.
At this point right now.
Yeah, they are. So that's taken into question, like, okay, you found a third team for Bradley Beal. You've traded your 2031 first, or you've traded it somewhere to get more assets. Maybe you get more picks from that. And Beal waives his no trade clause, and who's going to take back 111 million? Like, there's so many different variables, right? Like, it's just, there's like just so many different things as far as, it's not just like Jimmy Butler saying, I want to go to Phoenix, and Phoenix like, yeah, well, we want him, and then we're going to extend him, or we're going to pay him whatever amount of money here. But there's that other, like, wait a minute, Bradley's got a no trade clause, and he still has 57 million owed in that last year here. So I think there's more to be fixed with Phoenix, and I don't think, as you said, I don't think Jimmy Butler is the guy that does it.
And it's not like Ishbia in the front office can look at last year and say, oh, we stepped up in the postseason. All we got to do is just sneak in and we can beat anybody. They got into the postseason and they got just swept by Minnesota, a team that they handled well during the regular season, and they got swept. So it's not like they can look back at last year and feel like, oh, we can step up if we just get in. There's not a lot of evidence there. So with the Suns, I am very much against them trading for Butler, but at the same time, if they're going to go down this path, like, they really have no other option. On the other side of that, Cleveland, got a mailbag question. I'm going to sprinkle in a couple mailbag questions, Bobby. I got one from Gerald, and he sent me a link to someone's post over on X from Cavs Agenda. Okay. And Cavs Agenda posted, Nets get Isaac Okoro, George Niang, Jalen Tyson, and a pick for Kam Johnson and Day'Ron Sharpe. Do you think this deal would make some sense for Cleveland? They're the best team in the Eastern Conference so far this season. Kam Johnson would definitely add shooting. Is that a deal you would like to see the Cavaliers make?
Well, here's a little history for Cavs Agenda. I went back and when I wrote the Cavaliers trade guide section, I went back and looked at teams, championship level teams, and how active they were during the regular season and made a trade. And from 2014 to 2018, so we're taking into account San Antonio in 2014, and then the Golden State teams, right? Like in that stretch, that certainly that stretch run there, made one regular season trade, and that was Austin Day for Nando De Cola. So it is, how hard it is. To basically, like, the hardest thing to do is make a trade and disrupt kind of on the court, locker room, fit in. I think if you're Cleveland, and I like, listen, Kam Johnson's certainly the name, right? Like,
that would be the risk for like Memphis with Butler too. Is that midseason, is it worth doing now and disrupting everything?
I think for Cleveland, I think your goal is, how do we get under luxury tax? Okay, they're 1.9 over. Never paid a tax since in the non-LeBron era. It's not about the distribution that would be coming back. I think it's like 18, 19 million. It's basically like pausing the clock, the luxury tax clock. You remember you got Mitchell, Mobley, extensions kick in next year, right? So it's going to start to get expensive. I think if you're Cleveland, it's more about like, how do we move a guy like Okoro? Okay, not part of your core guys who's making around $10 million. And how do we get back like a $7 million guy, right? How do we get back an $8 million guy and not disrupt, like I would like the one trade I put out there. And this is just me looking at it from a cap perspective. Like, can you flip Okoro for like Okogie? And if you got to stand like a couple seconds, right? Like something like in that nature, right? Where you're kind of still getting a defensive wing guy on a non-guaranteed, you save money, you get under the tax, cost you a couple seconds. Like, I think that's kind of where I'm looking at it, like singles and doubles type for Cleveland. I like Kam Johnson a lot. The one thing that's interesting with Kam, and this, is that his salary is terrific. But the one thing that I think the league screwed up on with this CBA is the bonuses. Mm-hmm. The fact that unlikely bonuses count against the apron is a killer in some scenarios. So if you're Kam Johnson and you're Cleveland,
it's going to slow down a lot of potential trades.
Yeah, right? Because listen, he's on a great contract, right? He's like $22 million, and I think it goes 22 to 20, then back to 22. It's somewhere around there. So you're not just taking on the 22. You got to take on the $4.5 million of unlikely bonuses that apply to the apron, not the luxury tax, but the apron here. Kuzma has that in Washington. Kyle's got Middleton's got that. Here, there's a lot of guys that have these unlikely bonuses. So when you're doing the math and you're saying, okay, I'm going to send out $22 million. All right, you got to make sure you're under the apron well enough to take back whatever the $4.5 million. So that's, man, I like the trade format. I think it is a risk just because you're integrating that one guy who's having a career year, and you're sending out two or three players in that deal.
Yeah, I mean, it'd definitely be a risk. I think you're taking
who I would if I was a team regarding Kam, Kevin. If I was a team, and this team doesn't do deals during the regular season. If I was a team, I would look at it if I was Orlando.
Yeah. They need shooting bad. 30th in attempts, 30th in 3-point percentage.
The last
He'd take all their threes, Bobby. He'd take every single one of them.
The last regular season trade they made where they traded, listen, they've built their roster organically. They've got, out of their 15 players, only Wendell Carter and Gary Harris were acquired via trades. So they don't, they don't do that. Yeah. They're usually, this is who we are. We're going to get Franz back. We got Paolo back. But man, you watched them last year in that Cleveland series. We're watching them this year, 30th in the league in 3-point percentage. If there's an aggressiveness or if you want to be aggressive, you've got all your picks. You got, whether it be Cole Anthony or Gary Harris, guys that are will expire eventually here, that kind of matchup. You got the flexibility before it starts getting spending. That would be, for me, the Kam Johnson destination would be probably more, or Orlando should probably dip their toe in that pool there.
Yeah, I mean, Orlando should definitely be looking for shooting. On my podcast last week, I mentioned, well, they should be looking for a guard. I said Zach LaVine, if they want to go really expensive, or Anthony Simons, Colin Sexton. But like, Simons is pretty streaky. Sexton is a good shooter, but he's not Kam Johnson like you're talking about. He's not even Zach LaVine as a shooter. Kam Johnson's kind of that middle ground where he doesn't affect the playmaking nature of Banchero and Wagner and even Suggs. Or Anthony Black as a guy who can handle the ball too off the bench, but he can just help play dribble handoff, cutting to the rim, off screens, just spot ups. And Kam Johnson this year, he's ran some pick and roll too. He's looked good with kind of an expanded nature of his offense for that Nets team. And granted, I think for a team like, I don't know, the Thunder. The Thunder are connected to Kam Johnson a lot. At one point, I was very much a fan of Kam Johnson going to OKC. Kam Johnson would never do some of the stuff for OKC that he does for Brooklyn. It just it's not going to happen with all the ball handlers they have there.
Here's a funny story, and you're right. And I think when guys are on like these, lottery teams playing out the string, you're magnified as the best player. And when you probably go to Oklahoma City and you're like the fifth best player, sixth best player, like I always go back to, to kind of turn back the page. Like when I was with the Nets, we traded Terrence Williams, who we had drafted out of Louisville, probably after his second year to, we couldn't shoot the ball at all. And we traded him to Houston, and it was part of a 3-team deal. We got Sasha Vujacic, right? And we got Sasha, and he made 3 threes the first game. Like we were 20 and 40. And we're like, man, this guy couldn't do this. So when you get guys, or when you put guys in situations where they're your, Cam Thomas, another example, right? What is Cam Thomas on Cleveland or Boston? Is he a sixth man? Is he what is his role? So for Kam Johnson, because his role is magnified in Brooklyn, it's different than it would be for a team like Oklahoma City. It could be or Cleveland. He's probably back to the days in Phoenix, right? Mm-hmm. He's probably in that kind of that sixth man role.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think with Kam Johnson, that's the challenge. He's on a good salary. Are any of those bonuses going to hit? Is there a chance
There's one that's going to hit. It's I think it's 400,000 or 500,000. There's one that's going to hit. That's the, and even if Brooklyn keeps him, I think they're like 667 below the luxury tax. It won't push them over. Won't push them over luxury tax.
I think your point about Cleveland maybe trying to cut a little salary makes sense for the long view with them, because they're a team that's not just hoping to contend this season. At the same time, if the window's open, Bobby,
yeah,
you got to go for it. Like if you're a near 70-win team, sometimes maybe the long view, just throw it out the window and just be in the apron this year and be in the luxury tax and just say screw it. So I like that's where I kind of, part of me leans towards just go for it.
Yeah.
You feel like if the window's open, hopefully Boston just wears out in the postseason. But I understand both perspectives there. One other Kam Johnson deal, I got an Instagram message from Akon, not the artist, it's A.Con. and he said, how about Julius Randle for Kam Johnson? Obviously, do you need to have some picks involved in a deal here? That goes without saying. It would have to be some type of swaps for Minnesota to make it appealing at all to Brooklyn. But I think for Kam Johnson, Brooklyn could probably do better than that and would rather hold on to him. I don't see them settling for a deal like that. Do you?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Julius in Brooklyn makes sense. It is that that Minnesota team is fascinating as far as what happens.
They got to do something, Bobby.
Listen, like, as much as we talk about Phoenix and, we'll talk about Golden State, I'm sure, in a little while, like, you look at the standings, man, they're right with those teams. Like, they're right there. They lose in Memphis today by 2 after leading the whole game, right? Like, having a good sized lead and
up 16 in the second half.
Yeah.
They just blew it. Their offense just fell apart once again in the fourth quarter.
It's amazing. I went and looked at their numbers, per 100 numbers a year ago with taking Randle out and putting Towns in. And it's like plus 9.5 last year and plus like 2 this year. And now you've got DiVincenzo out for who knows, Conley has not been great.
Conley looks 37 at this point.
I mean, that's the reality of it.
They need Rob Dillingham had a pretty good night off the bench.
Yep.
Like you need a rookie who's like 170 pounds to be a contributor for your team. And like I think at this point, Finch needs to play Dillingham 30 minutes a night. Just screw it. See what you can get out of him. Try to invest in his development as much as possible, because Tim Connolly and that Minnesota front office, they did that deal for multiple firsts to move up to 8 with San Antonio as their big swing. That's what they're betting on Dillingham. So I think Finch needs to get on the same page there and just throw out Dillingham and see what you can get out of him, because Conley's just not the same guy. Like he had a great career, but he's nowhere close. Grizzlies fans saw that on the other end tonight.
It's amazing. I mean, you talk about like the maximizing the window, right? I mean, here's a team that was a couple games away from the NBA Finals. And I get it. Like, listen, there's a financial element to it, but like if you're in it, like you're in it, right? We've already traded the house for Gobert, right? Like we're in this thing here. And when you make that one trade before the start of the season, and now you've taken a step back. I mean, that's the reality. They've taken a step back. You have to look at
multiple steps back,
yeah. So here's the question: like, how much time do you got on your side to have this figure itself out, right? Like, or have you seen enough in the whatever? There's 40 games here, and I think if you're Minnesota, and the answer is I've seen enough. Like, all right, how are we trying to what are we turning Randle into, right? Like, can you turn Randle into something else? Don't worry about what you already made the Towns trade, right? Like you're not looking back and said, I don't know if we can trade him. We just look what you can try to maximize and see what you can turn him into. You can't combine his salary with anyone else. So whatever you're getting back is going to be, multiple, try to get multiple players. You got that Detroit pick that who knows, maybe it gets conveyed this year. I think it's top 13 protected. You got a Utah second, which is actually a late first kind of where the Jazz are. So you do have a couple things that you can try to trade with it.
Let's talk about the Warriors, Bobby, right after we take this quick break.
Introducing Daily Draw, the latest free-to-play game from Yahoo Sports. Daily Draw gives you a pack of 6 prediction cards every day based on the day's biggest sporting event. Download or update the Yahoo Sports app on the Apple App Store or Google Play and join the action with Daily Draw today.
All right, Bobby, we saw the Warriors and Celtics play tonight, a rematch of the 2022 finals. It did not go nearly as well for Golden State, just like the season has. They lost by 40. on their home court, 125-85 to the Boston Celtics. Warriors are now 21-21 on the season. Man, I mean, it's ugly for this team. It was ugly with Draymond Green. It's about to be uglier without him for the week or so that he's going to be sidelined at this point. I've been thinking, Bobby, I wrote last week an article on Yahoo Sports and talked about it on my podcast about how Steph needs to look around and he needs to think about, is this where I want to spend the remainder of my career? He should at least think about, is this where I want to be? The flip side of that is the Golden State front office. I think they need to think about, maybe we should be pulling the plug early here and getting something for our aging stars, especially seeing this against the Celtics. Obviously, you are with the Nets at the time, the KG Paul Pierce trade. Danny Ainge decided, you know what? Fans are going to be pissed off at me. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to trade Pierce. I'm going to trade Kevin Garnett, two legends, and you guys were the team that decided to take a swing. Understandably so, they were still playing high-level basketball. Stephen Curry and Draymond Green still playing high-level basketball now in their mid-30s. I would think Joe Lacob in that Warriors front office sees Jason Tatum, sees Jaylen Brown, who were some of the fruits of that Celtics-Nets trade, and thinking, man, wouldn't it be better to get something in return for Stephen Curry and Draymond Green instead of letting them just retire? We're still going to build their trophies. We're still going to their statues outside. We're still going to hang their jerseys in the rafters. It's not going to tarnish their legacies at all. But shouldn't we do this to at least try to sustain winning? That's more light years ahead to me than letting these guys spend their whole careers in their jerseys. I know I might be cutthroat saying that, but I was raised a Boston sports fan, Bobby, who saw Nomar Garciaparra get traded, a favorite on the Red Sox, leads to a World Series. The Patriots cutting Lawyer Molloy, trading Richard Seymour, getting rid of these star players, then winning Super Bowls. The Celtics trading Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, leading to more young players and then another championship and sustained success. This is just the way it was when I was raised. It's been that way really my whole life watching these Boston sports teams. I think the Warriors, if they really want to sustain success, that's the path that they should probably be thinking about going.
Well, and it's almost like, going back to Boston, and I think where Danny Ainge had an advantage, kind of how he formulated the next move with Pierce and Garnett is because he was with those Celtics teams when Bird and Parrish and McHale got older, right? Yep. And that eventually, listen, there was a lot of things that happened, whether the Len Bias death, Lewis death, right? Like there's a lot, like those were supposed to be the guys, right? Like coming up. So Danny saw it like, listen, we're not going to have it how it ended that era. And now we move. So that's where your thinking is, if you're in Golden State, it's like, how does this get better? Okay. How do we let's look at it a couple different ways. Is there a magic wand out there, trade that can make this team better? I don't see it right now. Okay. And eventually, and I know Warrior fans don't want to hear it for this year. And your point, I think, is probably more of a summer thing. I think that's a hard question they're going to have to ask in the summer. For this year, I think the one trade you make is get under the luxury tax. I think that, and Warrior fans will not be happy when I say that. Like I'm putting my business hat on and I'm saying, can I trade Looney or Payton and get under the luxury tax, and we go from there? Because I just don't see, I'm waving the white. Like sometimes you got to just pick up your chips and walk away from the table as far as just trying to get better. And if you fall out of this thing, where they are, and there's no guarantee they're not even going to get in the play-in, no guarantee at all. I think there is a moment of truth where you do have to sit down with Curry in the offseason and say, this is where we are, and this is where our options are going to be. And there's never a guarantee that someone's going to be available. They could be waiting forever that Giannis could become available. I mean, you want to go out and get the $240 million that's left on Joel Embiid? Like, is that what you want to do? So I get where you are. I get where you're saying. because as I look at it right now, the hardest thing to do is like, and I thought they did a pretty good job this offseason with, post Clay and Heald and Anderson and Melton and that crew and kind of patching as much as they could together here. And they got off to a good start. But what we're seeing right now, this is a team that's going to be in the lottery. I mean, that's the reality of it here. And I don't see a Nikola Vucevic trade out there all of a sudden, like taking this team on a major run. And I don't believe Zion will get traded. And like, there's just nothing out there. And I do think that's going to be the as I said, as you laid it out, that's the hard discussion that they're going to have this summer. Everyone, because for the best interest of the organization, it might be something like that. Moving, because a year from now we could be talking again and be like, Bobby, Golden State's 21-20. Like, what do you do? And it's like, you're going to overpay Kuminga. What are your options? So I totally get that. Because the reality is, man, I've not gone through this exercise. I would think if you put Curry on the open market with multiple years left on his contract, you'll get more than what we traded for Pierce and Garnett. You will get like Mitchell, Gobert, Bridges type offers, like multiple picks as far as what could be available out there. The funny part is that some of these teams are going to be so limited because their 2032 picks are going to be frozen because of the second apron and stuff like that. But that's a story for another day. But I do think, as you said, I think that is probably definitely a discussion that you have. Probably not right. Right now, probably not the right moment.
Probably not right now. But what if the Magic do call up and say, "Oh, we'll give you Jonathan Isaac, Anthony Black, and Cole Anthony, and all
4 first and 4 and 3 swaps," right?
Like, think about it. Dunleavy and Lakeups, like they have to at least have a conversation. I would think if that offer's on the table.
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, what happens if Brooklyn called and said, "We'll give you everything"? Yeah, we'll give you everything. You can have all the picks. I think we can get so and so next year to play with Curry.
or like, for Draymond, like what if this starts with Draymond? Like Steph is hard to deal. He makes over $50 million, but for Draymond, like think about a couple years ago, Bill Simmons and the rumors about Draymond and Dallas. What if Dallas, they're missing the ability to play small ball? What if Dallas calls up offering Gafford and Klebe a very easy salary match? Then, a 2025 first, or 2 seconds, or another first, something along those lines. Like, I think the Warriors are at least taking a meeting, at least thinking about it.
No, I agree. I think the interesting thing with Curry is that, and it goes back to the whole Beal discussion with the no trade, is that, and it's one rule I wish the league had put in, is that players who sign extensions are allowed to amend their contracts and add a no trade. Because that's why we don't see it at all. I mean, Curry should be the guy out there. Certainly LeBron has one also, but he's the guy that should have a no trade, right? Who says, I dictate where I want to go.
Great point.
If I want to get traded to. But because he signed an extension, you're not allowed to put those, you can only do it if a player signs as a free agent.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that would be the difficult thing. Like if you're sending him somewhere that he doesn't actually want to go. Because Pierce and Garnett,
I think he almost has like
going to the net.
He has like a de facto no trade.
Yeah. but with Draymond, if you
Draymond might be a different story.
He punched away their future. But if you send him to Dallas, Draymond that is, or home to Detroit, like if he's part of this Pistons team.
I'd love that.
First year, right? Like, wouldn't that be cool? Isaiah Stewart and a first and 2 or 3 seconds, something like that, or 2 firsts.
You don't want to see him play with Isaiah Stewart?
That would be super fun. Just an easy salary for the deal. But if it's Detroit, a homecoming story with an upstart Pistons playoff team, or it's Dallas and he goes down as the final piece, rejoining forces with Clay, like. Either of those would be great fits for Steph. Like it's just different. It's different with him. You need to send him somewhere where he'd want to be and where he has approval. So that's the tough part with him, man. But the Draymond stuff, I'd be intrigued if Detroit or Dallas some team like that did call up and make a strong offer to the Warriors. Like, you talk about getting under the luxury tax for them, like maybe Draymond could be the piece that helps you get under the tax.
Listen, I don't have I'm just throwing hypotheticals out here, but
All
if I was a team, I was a team, I would make a call. Why not?
Why not? Mm-hmm.
Why not? Hey, you smell blood in the water. Probably not on Curry. I'm not going to insult Mike. Mike, that would leave you that way. We used to do that. We used to do that in the Nets office when LeBron was in Cleveland, and we used to call Griffin, like, bust his balls and be like, they'd go on like a 5-game losing streak, and we'd call and be like, is you gonna do anything with LeBron at the deadline? And he'd like hang up the phone on us.
You guys aren't that different than me and my buddies in fantasy leagues.
So I wouldn't. No, I probably would not pick up the phone and call Curry, but I would pick up the phone and be like, "Hey, what do you guys where you are? Well, hey, we'll give you 2 guys and a first. Get that money off your books. Clean slate. Would you want to do something like that?" I'd make a phone call.
I think it's worth thinking about, Bobby. I really do. And like I said, that might be me being like, insensitive as not saying, well, you want him to retire and spend his whole career in one place, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference. Like, it did not tarnish Paul Pierce's reputation at Boston or Kevin Garnett's at all in the slightest to see those guys go. Just like Noma was still a legend for the Red Sox and helped them come back up. He just never won a World Series there. But it's like sometimes those tough decisions are what franchises need to make across sports in order to end up sustaining success. And it goes the other way too. Sometimes you have to trade really good young players or future picks to have a chance to do something. Like the flip side of it, to tie this to Boston again, is like there were a lot of people who didn't want to trade for Kevin Garnett in 2007. They wanted to keep Al Jefferson and keep the young players and continue staying young. But sometimes when you see an opening, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But you got to take those swings like in either direction.
Well, and you know this, and you study teams. It's like you're probably going to have 2 really lean years. Right? Like 2 or 3 year lean years, like whether it be Houston post Harden, they had a bunch of lean years, and then certainly they make a head coaching change and things change and they draft really well. OKC post Durant, post Russ, post PG, but you got Shea. Like, you get one of those studs, like you get a stud in a trade and then some good draft picks, man, things turn around quickly, and nobody remembers. They'll remember the great years there, but now it's like, okay, we got this young fun group that's going to win 47 games, and we've got the 2 picks next year in the first round. That's what teams that's what teams remember.
100%, and that's why for this Warriors team, like, yes, it's you'd be getting future picks, but you're only 5.5 back from the 8th best odds. Like that comes with 26% chance at top 4, 6% chance at number 1, getting Cooper Flagg, who I saw over the weekend talk about him with John Fanta later on this podcast. But man, there's some great prospects in 25 and then in 26 with DeBonsa going to BYU. 25 and 26 are pretty good years to be bad.
Yeah.
And that's part of my thought process here with the Warriors or any of these teams that might be thinking of bottoming out with their own picks, of course, where you can control your own destiny. But man, it's going to be tough for Golden State, man. I don't think there's a deal out there for them, Bobby. I think they need to be thinking about this. Got to think about it.
I think they might be waving the white flag to the trade down. Like, eventually, like I always make this remark, like eventually you go to the ATM and like most times the money just doesn't come out, right? Like you're just like it just spits out insufficient funds, and I just don't think there's that deal out there that can kind of change the season around.
Me neither, Bobby. Bobby, we got a couple big weeks coming up. I'm excited for it, even though it's possible with all the CBA complications that we don't see an active deadline. Anybody can be, well, maybe unless Bradley Beal, anybody can be traded under the CBA, right? Like the beauty of the CBA real quick is like, it really makes teams think out of the box. There's accountability now.
Like you make one bad mistake and like you're screwed, right? Like it really makes teams like become more creative as far as how they go about making deals.
Should be fun, Bobby. Looking forward to it. Your trade guide will be coming out on ESPN sometime over the next week, you said, right?
Yeah, should be hopefully within the next week.
Everybody be on the lookout for that. Thanks, Bobby. Have a good night.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
And joining me now is the unbelievable, the excellent Big East announcer, John Fanta. John, what's going on?
Kevin, it is great to be with you. It's fun to be talking with you this early in the year about the NBA draft. I know it won't be our last conversation. I always love talking hoop with you, my friend. This is going to be a really fun draft year. I'm excited.
It's going to be a fun draft year. I think we're setting up for a really fun March Madness as well. One of the favorites in March Madness. I saw on Saturday in Boston against Boston College, a bad basketball team, that BC Eagles team this year. But going against Duke, I had to drive in. I had to go see them because I had to see Cooper Flagg in person for myself for the first time. I had never seen him live in person. And what I saw was more of the same in the sense that we already know he's the number one pick in this year's draft. We know he's a dominant force, but I wanted to see the way it felt in person. He ended up with 28 points on 9 of 14 from the floor, 5 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. But seeing it in person, John, I know you've seen him live as well. I felt like he's even quicker. He feels even bigger in person. You can see that with the spin moves. And then I'm not sure like what was shown on the broadcast and then what wasn't. But like he had this block in the second half of the game. This was after he got hit in the face, when he had a ferocious dunk after the hit in the face and all that, screaming and all that. But he had a block. Duke's like up 20 at this point in the game. And the BC big man rolled into the lane. Cooper Flagg made a quick rotation over. He kind of like swiped the ball to try to strip it when it was low. But then the big still brought the ball up. And Flagg like had the hand-eye coordination or reaction time to still reach his arm up and block the shot. And after that, he's flexing and yelling. And that's where I don't know if the broadcast caught that, but it's like, it's a 20-point game. And this dude's still reacting to getting hit in the face and the overrated chants and how close it was in the first half. I come away loving Flagg even more after seeing him in person.
That's the biggest thing that comes to mind with Cooper Flagg, Kevin, is the competitive nature. So before we analyze the prospect, you want to analyze the person. And he is going to be a slam dunk at the next level because he was playing like a pro in high school. He never wavers in his intensity. Never. He does not take a play off. It's like he's wired, like a computer, like a high-tech IBM machine. That's what Flagg reminds me of on both ends of the floor. On the defensive end of the floor, he is the most instinctually gifted prospect I have ever covered. And I've covered college basketball really, really closely for the last 7 years, now 8 years, and I have not seen a player possess the defensive traits like Flagg at the age of 18. At the age of 18. If he doesn't block a shot, he alters it with his presence. He knows where to be at all times. He doesn't get lazy defending a screen. If you go at him, good luck. I mean, I don't think that's a good idea because that's the kind of player that he is. He could fit right into an NBA game now defensively. The offensive end of the floor, he's blossoming. His ability to get to the free throw line, is he going to be able to do that to the same degree at the NBA level? The answer to that right now is probably not. It's not a negative, it's just reality. Kevin, over the last 3 games, he's gotten to the free throw line 29 times. So the scoring is there in the regard of he can attack the basket viciously and has an ability to dunk it home, to finish, to stay balanced, to stay poised very well. He knows his role so well. For me, my biggest question with Cooper Flagg coming into college was, what are we going to see from the three-point shot? It's been better over the last couple of weeks. In the last 3 games, he's knocked down a combined 7 threes. In 5 of the last 7 games, 4 of the last 6 games, he's hit multiple threes at a better percentage. Earlier in the season, he was really struggling with his jump shot. And that led to Duke taking some losses because I don't think that he had fully gotten confident with it again yet. But when I look at Cooper Flagg, the player and the prospect, he's a total home run. He really is. And he's got so much to his package. But I think that it's the defensive end of the floor that I've never had a player that could score 42 points in a game like he did against Notre Dame. And I'm still as entertained watching him defend as I am with him scoring. That's the ultimate testament to the kind of competitor, to the kind of player, to the kind of number one draft pick, which he will be, no question about it. He's going to be the number one pick. I will go for no smoke in this candidacy. He will be the top pick in the draft. It's because to the degree that he does it on both ends of the floor at the age of 18 is absolutely frightening for anybody else.
I mean, the intensity level's nonstop, as you said. It's like Kevin Garnett-esque, and really, that's what it reminds me of. Like the intensity, like you said, the intelligence as well, the awareness. That play that I mentioned with the block shot. I mean, like even if it's just like I hope the broadcast. I haven't watched the game back yet, but I hope the broadcast showed a replay of that because I'd love to see the attempt at the swipe and then the reaction to still go up and get the block. Like it was insane. Seeing that in person, I was kind of like sitting kind of in the direction of where it happened. So I got a good view of that. But I mean, the dude's incredible. And offensively, like you said, John, he's been way better as of late, in part because getting in the basket. And I think that was apparent against BC. He's just bigger. He's faster. He's quicker. He has the footwork. He can just overpower some of those smaller guys. But the jump shot improvement, ever since he turned 18, I don't know if something just changed within him turning 18. I'm sure it's more than that. It's just the development of the season. But 52% of his threes have been made ever since he turned 18 years old, making 86% of his free throws as well. So we have at least a tiny sample here. He turned 18 on December 21st. It wasn't that long ago, still just about exactly a month now. But it's at least encouraging. We're seeing a month's worth of Flagg, a guy who had questions about, well, how good is his jumper really? Hitting everything from three, hitting everything from the free throw line, and hitting some really tough mid-range shots as well. Turnarounds, pull-ups, showing really good footwork. Like with Cooper, I think a lot of the comparisons we've heard for him have been like those defensive-oriented players. Like sometimes you hear Andrei Kirilenko for him, and that's kind of a nod to, oh, well, he can be an elite defender, but maybe there's some limitations offensively as a number one guy. Occasionally you hear him compared to Paolo Banchero offensively. I think that's kind of a Duke comparison, big guy who can handle the ball. But the way his shot has improved, at least this past month, sometimes I'm like, are there shades of Kawhi? Could there be? Is there a chance if his offense does blossom, if this last month is real? Is there a chance of that?
Kawhi Leonard's an interesting comparison because Kawhi's defense was incredible, and then look what happened when the offensive piece fully came to fruition.
Exactly, John.
So there's some of that there. I think competitive nature, there's a Kevin Garnett there, but Cooper's got a little bit more silent assassin to him. Like, honestly, I think it's part of the reason why he's not getting covered more nationally is because he does talk, Kevin, but nothing seems to be getting amplified on a lot of the broadcast coverage, at least yet. And the other part of it is, look how bad Boston College is. Let's face it. You said, what is it about since his 18th birthday? I do want to jump in there. The ACC is an 18-team league. And right now, they only get 4 teams to the NCAA tournament. This is the Atlantic Coast Conference we're talking about. We're talking about some great traditional brand name programs that are just not meeting the mark. So it's harder to, early in the season, why was he struggling? Well, when you're facing the likes of Kentucky and Kansas and your schedule is loaded to the degree that it is, and you took a couple of losses, now those are the only 2 games that they did lose, you're facing different levels of competition. It's just a different stage, combined with the fact that you're only playing your 2nd, 3rd, 4th college games versus now you're playing your 16th, 17th, 18th college game. But it's there. The Kawhi Leonard piece is there. I think there's Anthony Davis to the skill set in the regard of rim protection, of mobility.
Just smaller. Like you mean like a smaller version. Like 80s, significantly longer. Like, he's a true big, true center type of player. Flagg like in a forward form, you mean?
Yes, in a forward form. That's exactly what I mean. Is he's not the exact same because he is smaller. But
Which speaks to how there's no perfect comp for him. There's just not for Flagg. I can't come up with
not.
like,
Kevin,
this is clearly what he should be.
Kevin, think about this. I heard last spring a person that I highly respect in the mock draft game and in the draft game. And Kevin, we've got a million colleagues who dip their toe in this, and everybody's got a different path, whether they're following these kids closely at Peach Jam or they're watching as much college now, and you're talking with different evaluators. And somebody said to me, well, yeah, Cooper Flagg, I kind of think of Andre Kirilenko. And I said, man, he's better than, there's more upside than that. I get a little what you're saying, but I think that's it. We've just brought up 5 or 6 names. There's no one true comparison. It's kind of like, the Kawhi thing's interesting. The AD piece is interesting. The Kevin Garnett piece is interesting, but he's not exactly like any one of those guys. What's the point? Where are we trying to get with this? Paolo Banchero's a good one, too. I do see a lot of similarities between Cooper and Paolo, and we know where Paolo Banchero ended up at the end of the day in the NBA draft, right after all the smoke and fire. What he can be. 3 or 4 months ago, a lot of people were like, yeah, he's the most sure thing. But Harper and Bailey, we think have more upside. And I'm like, this guy's too wired for me to just give that take definitively. I think when we're comparing him to all these names and saying there's pieces of their games, that gives him a chance to be extraordinary.
Yeah, he definitely has a chance. He has a chance to be extraordinary, and at worst, with Cooper Flagg, we're talking about a guy who's going to be like one of the 50 best players in the NBA. Like a really good player at a minimum. Good player because he's going to be elite defensively. He's going to be versatile offensively. He's going to be able to do a lot of different things offensively. He can screen and roll and cut. He can be a guy who crashes the boards and hits some spot up threes. He can handle a bit. He can do a lot offensively, where at worst, we're talking about a top 50 player in the league for many years.
I agree with that.
At best, he could be top 5, top 10, all NBA caliber player, one of the faces of your franchise. So I view him as one of, obviously, there's a lot of bust number 1 picks that don't end up reaching their potential. That happens. But I think Cooper is one of the safer number 1 picks that we've had. Probably, Victor Wembanyama, of course. Anthony Davis was incredibly safe when he was selected as well out of Kentucky after his freshman year. And even AD hasn't quite reached the expectations that were set for him, because he's as amazing as he's been. People thought, oh, maybe if he blossoms offensively, he could become, an all-time great. He didn't, right? So he just became still a top 10 player. Still, that's not to take anything away from AD. But with Cooper, that speaks to the point I'm getting at here, where AD didn't reach expectations, but still was a top 10 player. Cooper Flagg, at worst, top 50, at best, top 5. That's what I'm saying with Cooper Flagg. It's a compliment to AD, a compliment to Cooper Flagg. So I come away from that BC game feeling even higher on him, just with the little things you see, the way he cheers and celebrates his teammates as well.
That's it.
It's the guy's personality. I just think he's going to make a positive impact for your team for, a decade plus.
I'd say at worst, top 30. And maybe I could meet you halfway and say, after you just saw him at Boston College Live, you'd have to say top 40, just because I'm in agreement with you. I think that this is a guy, he's going to be a dream for an organization. He's going to lift everybody up around him. He's that type of competitor. Defensively, how much do you have to really teach?
Nothing.
Nothing.
What is there to teach?
He is just so wired to compete. I mean, when he walked into Peach Jam 2 summers ago with his Maine United team, Maine United had never been a thing at Peach Jam, and Kevin probably won't ever be a team again in Peach Jam. And he walked into the event, and he acted like he owned the event. And guess what? He did. Because then he stepped on the floor, and he's got close to a quadruple double. And you could sit there and say, John, you're going off high school games. You just know. You know early on if somebody's got that it. And, when I'm not going to lie to you, there's a bunch of other kids that were really well regarded in their classes. And I'm like, yeah, they're good player. It's like Cooper Flagg. You're like, yeah, he could be in a college game right now, and he's 17 years old, 16 years old. So
just like we're saying now, right? Like when he's 17, he could play in the NBA today.
He could play
mentally.
minutes.
Yeah, he definitely could. You could plug him onto an NBA court today, and he'd be able to survive out there. And obviously, like there'd be rookie struggles for somebody like him, for anybody, but he's going to be a success right away.
The track down block skill set, I can't wait to see it on the court in the NBA.
Yeah, me too. John, we have to introduce a new segment right here, because the future of TikTok is in flux, but PickTok is here to stay. So with this segment, we're going to be talking about the future of the NBA draft picks, a few minutes each on a handful of prospects. And to start off PickTok, I want to start off with your personal favorite non-top 3 guy to watch so far this college basketball season.
Derik Queen. He's got old school, the way he plays the game, old school Moses Malone type of skill set to him. This guy's a throwback because he slows the game down. In a world where all the freshmen, now Cooper Flagg's not like this either, but in a world where most of the freshmen, it's like everything's fast. Got to make the next play. Got to be there. Oh, I'm reacting. I'm not being proactive. Kevin, Derik Queen forces everybody to react to him. And I'm talking about the Maryland Terrapins freshman. And if you have not watched him, watch the way he plays the game. When he has the basketball, the game is played on his terms. He's averaging 15, 8, 2 assists per game on the season. He's at 55% from the floor. 3-point percentage. It has not been there. You know, that's the piece to his game. Like he's a traditional big man. He's not been known for his 3-point shooting, and that's got to come along. But the amount that he can rebound, 14 rebounds against Northwestern, a 12 rebound performance against Purdue, an 11 rebound performance against Ohio State, 22, 11, and 5 assists against Villanova in a win earlier this year. This guy can fill it up. And in the first 8 games of the season, he had 4 performances of at least 20 points. He willed Maryland to a win over Minnesota with 27 points. And you know what? I just think that when you look at this kid, what makes me love him is he's mature. The game slows down when he has the basketball. He's got a wide array of post moves from about 15 feet and in. He can affect the game in different ways. He's a distributor. He's a better passer than he gets credit for, and he has fully embraced this year of college to develop and get better. I really like Queen. There's a lot of guys on the board that I love as well, but to go a little bit outside the box, I'm very bullish on the Maryland Terrapins freshman and think that he's a one and done.
Yeah, Queen's intriguing. He's intriguing because, like you said, we have so many bigs nowadays that are trying to be 3-point shooters, trying to be guards, and Queen sometimes can be. Like, he can attack a closeout, like he could grab a defensive rebound. He has a good handle for a guy who's 6'10", almost 250 pounds. His handle's really good. He has great footwork on the post. His at-rim finishing, like he's a right-handed player, but he can use his left hand out of face-ups and drives and post-ups, cuts and rolls to the basket. Like, he shoots 71% at the rim on the season. Great finishing numbers, not just a dunker either. But the lack of a shot, I hope it develops because that is important. You can't just be a low-post guy in today's NBA unless you're also elite defensively. And that's where with Queen, I'm like, I want to love him. I want to love Queen, but defensively, he just seems heavy-footed. Sometimes, like, I don't know if it's laziness or fatigue, but he had a play against Nebraska over the weekend where it's like a 2-point game, a minute left in the game. It's the Nebraska's at the free throw line, and Queen didn't box out. He just got out-muscled. They gave up the offensive board at a critical moment. And in that same game, Queen also had 0 points, his first 0-point game of the season, where like I see the highs, but then there's some lows where I worry, like, well, what if he's like Jared Sullinger? What if that's
I hope not.
What if that's what he is, where it's like, well, if Sully develops a jumper, if Sullinger gets better defensively. And Sullinger was always a great low post player going back to Ohio State. But that's where my mind kind of goes. Like, I just worry about that destiny as like a modern tweener if those two areas don't develop. Do you see reason for optimism with his defense?
I do. I think that it's there. I think he has a really good motor about him. I've heard from the Maryland staff how coachable he is, how open to feedback he is. The kid gets it. Like, You know when a freshman or a sophomore or an underclassman does not understand, does not process the game, does not process feedback. I've seen Derik continue to grow. Do I think that he's a top 10 pick in the draft? No. But that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what you asked me. We're going a little bit off the radar. I think there are others. I think LeBaron Thielen at Alabama is one to watch here. I like the Kansas transfer, what he's bringing to the table.
Great,
I love him. He could end up being a lottery pick. I think Will Riley at Illinois had a terrific first half on Sunday at Michigan State and seems to be understanding how to play the game. Around 6'7", 6'8", can put the ball on the floor and make things happen. But you asked me about Queen's defense. Queen, I do think that with the right staff and with the right process that he could figure out more when he needs to do on the defensive end of the floor. But for a guy that Kevin, like nowadays, when you're a freshman and you're a big man and you're not great shooting the basketball, you're going to be scouted. You're going to be scouted hard. And they're going to make it difficult for you to get 15 and 8 per game in the Big Ten. The Big Ten, which has more than capable big men again and is kind of this grinded out physical league. Like I said before, it's not like Derik Queen's just this bull in the china shop and is all over the place. He's got a smoothness to his game. Very, very smooth in how he plays the game. And I think the want to is there to evolve defensively. I like Derik Queen enough to say that, yes, I think he can pan out on both ends.
All right, so next up, I want to talk about my player who maybe they move up to number 2. Earlier in the year, John, we were talking about, well, was there anybody that could take the number 1 spot from Cooper Flagg? I'd say the answer has become definitively no. Dylan Harper, incredibly talented prospect. Ace Bailey, very talented 6'10" scorer, both playing for Rutgers. I don't think anybody's taking number 1 from Cooper Flagg. So now I'm changing the question to, well, could somebody take number 2? Could there be a guy who does that? And the name I have in mind here is Kasparas Jakucionis. You mentioned Illinois. He is a 6'6" freshman guard for that team. This year, he's averaging 15.9 points, 5.3 assists, 5.1 rebounds, fills up the box score. He reminds me of Tyrese Halliburton. There's just an incredible creativity with him as a playmaker, a feel for the game. The pace he plays with out of pick and roll is very Halliburton-esque from his underclassmen years at Iowa State, where the feel is just going to translate. And the Halliburton questions at the time were, well, can he handle? Is he quick enough? Is he athletic enough? I think with Jakucionis, the feel is overwhelming. He gets to the line despite those athletic questions, shoots nearly 90% from the free throw line. He still is able to get to his step back jumper from 3 with this really economical style of play. Like, he doesn't need to dribble a lot in order to get into moves. Everything that happens quick and decisive with him. Hits almost 40% of his threes. And like I said, the playmaking is just absolutely gorgeous. Do you think he has a chance to push for a top 3 spot in this year's draft class? Or am I jumping the gun a little bit there before we get into some even bigger games for Illinois down the stretch of this season?
You're not jumping the gun. In fact, it took me a lot to keep Ace Bailey at number 3 in my latest mock draft for Fox Sports, because when I looked at Kasparas Jakucionis, I was seeing the production. I was seeing what NBA teams look for offensively. Has the perimeter shot, can do it off the dribble, brings pro background. He played for European Power FC Barcelona. This is a guy who, in wins over Oregon and Washington on the road, had a combined 34 points, 12 assists, and 11 rebounds. Terrific feel for the game. He is applying pressure for that number 2 spot, because when you have the pro experience, you could be a lead ball handler. You could play the point. You've got a really nice shooting touch. You understand defensive concepts, and you're averaging over 5 assists per game, over 5 rebounds per game, and you're shooting at least 40% from 3. And, oh, by the way, 87% from the free throw line. Like, there's not much to dislike, is what I'll say with Kasparas Jakucionis. Like, at a certain point, we're looking at him play. We're watching him play. He did not have a good game on Sunday at Michigan State. I thought the
fouled out in what, like 10 minutes?
Yeah,
what?
The official.
How does that even happen? What the? That's the bull. Some of those calls.
Poorly officiated game.
What was going on?
College officiating does have a problem.
So does NBA officiating. I mean, basketball is tough to officiate, to be fair, but I mean, some of those foul calls, like I don't know, just We don't need to talk about the foul calls. It was
But
just bad.
I think this kid, I'm with you. I think this kid is going to be a top 5 pick. Like, I would commit to that. And you're right. I mean, he's going to be in the thick of things with the 3rd pick because, Kevin, I think Dylan Harper will go too. But my debate internally right now is, yes, Ace Bailey's 6'11" and is really unique. There's times where he makes plays that remind you of the Kevin Durant skill set. Yeah, I know that sounds crazy, but it's just watch him play. He's got that type of game.
Well, there was that's fair. That's very fair to say where you see moments like that, because there was also like a Thon Maker is the next Kevin Durant highlight reel on YouTube when he was in high school. Like there's always moments from players, but then when you really dive into Ace Bailey, you're like, I have a lot of question marks. I have a lot of questions about what he's going to be.
I would say I have more questions about Ace Bailey than I have about Kasparas Jakucionis, but that Ace Bailey carries more upside. So that's going to be fit. 3, 4, 5 in this draft. And even 2, let's not lock Harper in, even though I think he'll be number 2. But I think that's going to come down to where the ping pong balls drop.
I don't think Harper should be locked in either. I mean, I really like Harper a lot. He's shooting the ball pretty well this year, 34.9% from 3, only 73% from the free throw line. To me, like that, like if you have Harper in for a workout on a Tuesday, and you're the team with the number 2 pick, and then a couple days later you're bringing in Bailey, and then a couple days after that you're bringing in Jakucionis. And if Jakucionis is just shooting the hell out of it in pre-draft workouts, whereas Harper maybe isn't, which there are questions about the reliability of his jumper, of the perimeter touch. I think there's a strong possibility that we do see Harper bump down to 3. And who knows? We'll see. Harper could also get better. He could significantly improve. We're only in January. Like you said, John, we're very early in the season, which is why my next question for you is about who's a freshman that stood out to you this season, but maybe they need even more time in college basketball before going to the NBA.
I'm going to go with Georgetown's Thomas Sorber, who I think has had a terrific season. With Thomas Sorber on the floor, Georgetown's been around from an efficiency standpoint, around a top 30 team in America and one of the best defensive teams in the country. He's averaged 14, 9, and close to 3 assists per game. Georgetown has not had the same player lead them in points, rebounds, and blocks since Othella Harrington in the early 1990s. So it's been a long time since Georgetown had a player like this. Thomas is an amazing story. He lost his father to colon cancer at the age of 6. His mother, Tennis, done everything for him, and his brother was a Liberian refugee in the late 1990s. What she has been able to do coming to America, working for her kids, Thomas has learned work ethic. Thomas has learned toughness. Thomas is a terrific player, and this big man can shoot the basketball a little bit. He hasn't been great from 3. It's been less than 20%, in fact. But I see something there. That's why, for me right now, Thomas Sorber's a first-rounder in the 20s. He could get paid at Georgetown. Yes, paid. They have a lot of money in D.C.
NIL.
Lawyers, doctors. Georgetown's got a rich alumni base, and Ed Cooley knows how to pull the strings. He can get paid anywhere, but I can tell you right now, he's going to get 7 figures if he stays in college. Easily. So why not get 7 figures, become one of the faces of college basketball next season, and develop yourself into a top 10 pick? That, to me, is a better mindset than, okay, we'll see what happens in the 20s. Because, Kevin, in this NIL day, you could make more money. Let's just say, I knock on wood when I say this, but let's just say your pro career doesn't go the way you want it. You will have had this extra year in college, and you would have made guaranteed 7-figure type money then that serves as a launching pad for your brand, the amount of attention you're going to get, and what your potential situation is. Because again, let's just say he gets Georgetown back on the map fully. They're a national brand. That makes Thomas Sorber a national name. He'll be getting attention. We'll be talking about him as one of the faces of the sport. You get a boatload of cash, then you develop your stock more so than you ever would have done this freshman season, which he's been very good. He's got a lot of people talking about him, but I think it could triple in attention and buzz. I think he needs the year. Why? The perimeter game has honing in to do. And I think it's easier with a full summer with your college staff than having to just enter the pros, maybe having to spend some time in the G League, and you're raw, and you're not getting paid as much, by the way, as what you could do by parlaying and having one more year of school.
He's 6 of 35 on jumpers this season, according to Synergy. So the jumper definitely needs work, but like you said, he has touch from the free throw line on, shots near the basket. I think there could be something there with him, but proving it would definitely do a lot for his draft stock. Pre-draft workouts could do if he did decide to test the waters. To me, I think you're probably right that Sorber's the type of guy that would significantly benefit, because then you go back, maybe you get even stronger, you become even better defensively. Instead of just being an imposing rim protector due to your size and length, maybe you develop your technique anymore in addition to your body. But if he does test the waters, and if a team in the 20s like Oklahoma City were to make a promise to you, I'd have a really hard time if I were his agent advising him to go back, because there's always risk in going back. You'd make more as a rookie. If you're in a situation where it's like an awesome developmental program, I'd have a hard time going back to college. With that said, I think he's somebody that does need a bit more time, but that's why NBA fit would be so important for him if he does decide to come out of school right now. But also it's early. Maybe by the end of March, he's a no-brainer. Maybe by the end of March, we're talking about him like a lottery pick. That's very possible as well. That can happen. Last one for you, John. Our last one for Pick Talk here. A senior. We're talking about Sorber as a guy who might need more time. Who is a senior that feels now finally ready-made to head to the NBA after years of development in college?
Hello, Kam Jones.
I loved Kam Jones last year. I loved him.
6'5" guard has been unbelievable for Marquette. And if I didn't pick Janai Broom or Cooper Flagg for my National Player of the Year, I think it'll end up being Flagg. I think he will join Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and Zion Williamson as the only freshman to also win National Player of the Year. I'd pick Jones. 19 points per game, 5 rebounds. But how about 7 assists per game?
Yeah. What happened with his playmaking development? Because last year in my draft guide, the comparison I had for him was Dante DiVincenzo crossed with Cam Thomas. The Cam Thomas comp being in there because Kam Jones more of a score-first player, bucket getter, not a playmaker. In what ways have you seen him improve as a passer this season?
Incredibly. But when you're not on the same team as Tyler Kolek, you're going to be called on to do more.
Yep.
So part of it was role allocation. He's with Kolek. He's with Oso Ighodaro, who got drafted and was a really unique passer and distributor of the basketball. There's going to be more playmaking needed because Shaka Smart didn't go to the transfer portal. Think about this. Over the last 3 years, Marquette's only had 8 total players start a game for them. And 3 of them have gone on to the pros.
Wow. That's a good stat.
So Kolek, Ighodaro, and Justin Lewis, I want to say. Here's the thing. And now Kam Jones, man. And when I look at Kam Jones, I just think that Shaka Smart has developed players to a really unique level the past couple of years. The proof's in the pudding. Look what he's done with Kolek and Ighodaro. He told us in September, you're going to find out how great of a passer Jones is. We didn't use him this way. Now we're finding by using him in this way that he's ridiculous at it. Sometimes with a player, you don't realize how good they are with something until you actually utilize them in that role consistently. Jones isn't a good passer. He's not a great passer. He's been an extraordinary passer. Why? 120 assists to 30 turnovers on the entire season. On the whole season. I mean, they've played 18 some odd games, and he's got 120 assists in those games. So I think it's their offense.
And John,
the way they do
that also follows what he did last season without Kolek. Last year, I had a stat in my draft guide before he took his name out of the draft. I wrote, there's playmaking upside in him. He had a 2.1 to 1 assist to turnover ratio in games point guard Tyler Kolek missed this season. So he had the great assist to turnover ratio last year in a very tiny sample size. And now he's doing it the entire year. To your point, like you said, Ighodaro out of the picture as well as a playmaking big. Opportunities there for him. And he's just even getting better with it. Like that does show the value in going back to school as well.
It really does. And that sometimes, Kevin, when a team plays a certain way without someone, you find things out about that team that maybe could be sustainable going forward. And that was it for Marquette, but that was it for Kam Jones. So you're right. I agreed with the decision to come back because, Kevin, I think that played a role too. I think Kam talked to his coach, and his coach said, this is important as well in the college game. I think Shaka said, you know what, man? You're going to be our centerpiece. We have faith in you, and we have faith in Stevie Mitchell, who's just a great college player, will make his money overseas. And I think he said, I'm not going to go into the portal. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. You are our alpha. This is your stage, senior. It's refreshing in this current day and age because this is a kid who stayed the course. He stayed the course. He came in as a freshman, was limited. Now he's at a point where I think he does hear his name called.
I just hope the jumper gets back to what it was last season. That's where I'm like, maybe last year ends up an outlier. He shot almost 40% from three last year. He's over 40% on dribble jumper threes, nearly 40% on catch and shoot threes. This year, he's down to 36% from catch and shoot threes, 23% on dribble jumper threes. That's probably in part due to more defensive attention being paid to him. Defenses don't have to worry about Kolek, more elite defenders being defending Kam Jones, but I'd like to see that number get up. The free throw shooting has always been below average for him as well. So NBA teams are certainly going to have questions about the reality of what his jump shot is. But as a guy with size who can play defense, who is showing serious playmaking chops, and has shown the ability to be a versatile scorer over 4 years in college, getting better each season, to me, he still feels like a good bet as a late first-round pick type of guy or early second-round draft pick. And a lot of those players end up being early contributors with all their years of experience. So I like Kam Jones. We had Kam Jones as a senior who is ready for the NBA. We had Thomas Sorber as a guy who probably needs more time but could end up a lottery pick. We had Derik Queen as a guy who you love that not a lot of people are talking about. And I had Jakucionis as maybe a guy who ends up number 2. Just think about him. John.
Yeah, so much fun.
We had a great season ahead of us in college basketball. A lot of great NBA games as well. Congrats to your Cavaliers for being awesome so far this year. You must be feeling on a high with Cleveland, huh?
They're having a heck of a season. Kenny Atkinson was an ace hire, and the way that Darius Garland has progressed is a testament to Cleveland's front office staying committed to a young core and now potentially getting their reward. I am pumped. It won't be a true success until I see the Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals. You know, as harsh as that sounds, Kevin, now to me, that is the goal. You got to make the ECF when you've had this type of season. Sometimes we see great regular season teams not do the same in the playoffs. I think this team can be different. They're getting it done on both ends. But is this the time for Donovan Mitchell to show he can get it done in the playoffs? I sure as heck hope so.
I look forward to talking to you again later this year, John. Have a good one.
Thanks, Kevin.